Last Thanksgiving, my daughter-in-law Crystal looked me right in the eye and said, "Helen, you're just dead weight in this family. When are you going to stop being a burden and move to a nursing home?" What Crystal didn't know was that the dead weight. She was talking to own the mortgage on our $400,000 house for 5 years. I've been secretly helping my son Danny keep his family afloat while Crystal spent money like water and treated me like garbage. But that Thanksgiving comment was the last straw. This is the story of how one cruel comment at a family dinner revealed who the real dead weight was and cost Crystal everything she thought she owned. My name is Helen Morrison, and until 5 years ago, most people saw me as just another widow living on a pension. I worked as a bank teller for 40 years, lived in the same small house for 30 years, drove the same car for 15 years. To the outside world, I was invisible. What people didn't know was that working at the bank had taught me about money, how it moves, how it grows, and most importantly, how to spot good investment opportunities. All my coworkers spent their paychecks on new cars and vacations. I was quietly buying rental properties. My husband Frank thought I was crazy at first. He'd say, "Helen, why are you buying that rundown duplex?" But I could see potential where others saw problems. I'd fix them up, rent them out, and use the income to buy more properties. By the time Frank passed away 8 years ago, I owned 15 rental properties and 3 commercial buildings. The income was more than enough to live comfortably, but I kept living simply. Old habits die hard, and I didn't want to become a target for people who only loved my money. My son Danny was the light of my life. He'd married Crystal 6 years ago, and I tried so hard to welcome her into our family. She was beautiful, vivacious, everything Danny thought he wanted. But from the beginning, I could see she looked down on me. Crystal would make little comments about my shabby house, my outdated clothes, my boring lifestyle. She'd roll her eyes when Danny wanted to visit me, and she'd always find excuses to cut our visits short. 3 years ago, Danny came to me in tears. Crystal had been shopping and spending like they were millionaires, but Danny's insurance job barely covered their basic expenses. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage and facing foreclosure. Danny was too proud to ask for help directly, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. He said, "Mom, I don't know what to do. Crystal says if we lose the house, take the kids and leave me. I can't lose my family." That night, I called my financial advisor, Frank Peterson. I told him I wanted to buy Danny's mortgage from the bank and restructure it so he could afford the payments. Frank thought I was being too generous, but I said, "He's my son. This is what mothers do." I paid off Danny's $320,000 mortgage and became his new lender, instead of the $2,800 monthly payment he couldn't afford. I charged him $1,200, just enough to cover property taxes and insurance. I told him the bank had agreed to a loan modification, and he never questioned it. But I made sure all the legal documents were properly filed. Technically, I owned Danny and Crystal's house. If they defaulted on payments to me, I could foreclose, just like any other lender. For 3 years, this arrangement worked perfectly. Danny could afford his payments. Crystal got to keep her house, and I got to help my son without him feeling like he was taking charity. But Crystal's attitude toward me only got worse. As Crystal felt more secure in her house, she became more openly hostile toward me. She'd forget to invite me to the grandchildren's birthday parties. She'd schedule family events when she knew I couldn't attend. She'd make snide comments about my appearance and lifestyle. My sister Maggie watched Crystal treat me like dirt for years. I'd go to Maggie's house after family dinners, trying not to cry about something cruel Crystal had said. But I never fought back because I didn't want to cause problems for Danny. The worst part was watching Crystal poison my grandchildren against me. She'd tell them I was too old to play with them, or that my house was boring compared to their friends. Grandparents who took them to Disney World and bought them expensive toys. But Lily and Mason still loved me. They'd sneak over to my house after school, and I'd help them with homework and bake cookies. Crystal hated that the children preferred spending time with me over listening to her complain about money. Last summer, Crystal started a new campaign. She began telling people that I was becoming a burden on the family. She'd say things like, "Poor Danny has to check on his mother constantly. She's getting so forgetful and needy." The truth was, I was sharper than ever. I was managing 15 rental properties, handling my own investments, and keeping detailed records of every financial transaction. but Crystal needed a narrative that justified her cruelty toward me. Last Thanksgiving, I spent 2 days preparing Danny's favorite dishes, the same recipes I'd made for 30 years. I brought homemade stuffing, green bean casserole, and the pumpkin pie he'd loved since childhood. When I arrived at their house, Crystal barely acknowledged me. She was too busy taking photos of her store-bought decorations for Instagram. She'd hired a catering company for most of the meal, but she made sure to take credit for everything. During dinner, Crystal dominated the conversation, talking about her plans to renovate the kitchen and add a pool to the backyard. When Danny gently mentioned that they couldn't afford major renovations, Crystal snapped. Crystal said, "We could afford anything we wanted if we didn't have to constantly worry about dead weight dragging us down." Then she looked directly at me and continued, "Helen, when are you going to stop being a burden and move to a nursing home? Danny and I need to focus on our real family." The table went silent. My 8-year-old granddaughter Lily started crying. Danny looked mortified but didn't defend me, and Crystal just sat there with a satisfied smirk, like she'd finally said what she'd been thinking for years. I stood up, kissed my grandchildren goodbye, and said, "Crystal, you're absolutely right. It's time for some changes around here." Then I left, and Crystal probably thought she'd finally gotten rid of me. What Crystal didn't realize was that she'd just declared war on the wrong person. That night, I called my attorneys Sarah Martinez and my financial advisor Frank. I told them what had happened and said I wanted to review all my financial arrangements with Danny and Crystal. Sarah reminded me that she could hear the hurt in my voice, but she could also hear something else: determination. I said, "Sarah, I want to know exactly what my legal options are regarding the mortgage. I hold on my son's house." What I discovered was eye-opening. Not only did I own Danny and Crystal's house, but I had legal grounds to call in the loan immediately if I chose to. The mortgage agreement included a clause that allowed me to demand full payment if the borrowers became hostile or abusive toward the lender. But I also discovered something else. Crystal had been forging Danny's signature on credit applications, using the house as collateral for loans Danny didn't even know about. She'd racked up $75,000 in debt against a house she didn't even own. Frank ran a complete financial analysis of Danny and Crystal's situation. Even with my reduced mortgage payments, they were spending $4,000 more per month than Danny earned. Crystal's shopping addiction and lifestyle expenses were driving them toward bankruptcy. I realized that Crystal's cruelty toward me wasn't just personal, it was strategic. She wanted me out of the picture so she could manipulate Danny into taking out more loans against the house. She had no idea that I was the one who actually owned it. That night, I called my attorney Sarah Martinez and my financial advisor Frank. I told them what had happened and said, I wanted to review all my financial arrangements with Danny and Crystal. Sarah reminded me that she could hear the hurt in my voice, but she could also hear something else: determination. I said, "Sarah, I want to know exactly what my legal options are regarding the mortgage. I hold on my son's house." What I discovered was eye-opening. Not only did I own Danny and Crystal's house, but I had legal grounds to call in the loan immediately if I chose to. The mortgage agreement included a clause that allowed me to demand full payment if the borrowers became hostile or abusive toward the lender. But I also discovered something else. Crystal had been forging Danny's signature on credit applications, using the house as collateral for loans Danny didn't even know about. She'd racked up $75,000 in debt against a house she didn't even own. Frank ran a complete financial analysis of Danny and Crystal's situation. Even with my reduced mortgage payments, they were spending $4,000 more per month than Danny earned. Crystal's shopping addiction and lifestyle expenses were driving them toward bankruptcy. I realized that Crystal's cruelty toward me wasn't just personal, it was strategic. She wanted me out of the picture so she could manipulate Danny into taking out more loans against the house. She had no idea that I was the one who actually owned it. I spent the next month developing a plan. I wasn't going to destroy Danny, he was my son and I loved him. But Crystal needed to learn that actions have consequences, and that the dead weight she dismissed was actually the foundation holding up her entire lifestyle. First, I had Sarah prepare a formal notice of mortgage default. Crystal's fraudulent loans against the house violated the terms of my mortgage agreement. Legally, I could demand immediate payment of the full $320,000 balance. Second, I had Frank calculate exactly how much money I'd saved Danny over the past 3 years. between the reduced mortgage payments and the interest I'd forgiven. I'd essentially given them $180,000 in free money. Third, I discovered that Crystal had been lying to Danny about their finances for years. She told him they were barely getting by while secretly spending thousands on designer clothes, spa treatments, and luxury items she hid from him. Had Frank create a detailed report of every purchase Crystal had made in the past 2 years. $3,000 at Nordstrom while telling Danny they couldn't afford new school clothes for the kids. $1,500 at a spa while claiming they needed to skip Lily's dance lessons to save money. But I wasn't ready to reveal everything yet. I wanted Crystal to dig herself deeper. So I decided to test just how far her greed and cruelty would go. I called Danny and told him I was thinking about selling my house and moving to a senior living community. I said I was worried about being a burden on the family and thought it might be time to downsize. Danny tried to reassure me, saying, "Mom, you're not a burden. Don't let Crystal's comments get to you. She's just stressed about money right now." But when I suggested maybe I should sell the house and use the money to help them get ahead financially, everything changed. Within an hour of that phone call, Crystal was at my door with a real estate agent. She had already researched my property value and had a plan for how to spend my money. I had installed security cameras in my home months earlier, ostensibly for safety, but they proved invaluable in documenting Crystal's true nature. What I recorded that day showed me exactly who I was dealing with. Crystal told the real estate agent, "The house is small and outdated, but the lot is worth at least $200,000. Helen's too old to understand real estate values, so we should be able to convince her to price it low for a quick sale." When the agent expressed concern about whether I was really ready to sell, Crystal said, "Trust me, she's losing it. Danny and I are basically her caretakers now. She can't handle her own finances anymore." Crystal spent 2 hours in my house, not asking about my well-being or where I planned to live, but calculating how much money she could get from selling my property. She even suggested I could gift the proceeds to Danny and Crystal to avoid estate taxes. She left behind her notebook, and I found pages of calculations. She'd already planned to use my house sale money to pay off her secret debts, renovate their kitchen, and buy a new BMW. She'd allocated exactly $0 for my actual care or housing. My sister Maggie was furious when I showed her those notes. She said Crystal wasn't just being cruel, she was planning to financially abuse me. Crystal wanted me to sell my home and give them the money, then probably stick me in the cheapest nursing home she could find. That's when I realized Crystal wasn't just ungrateful, she was dangerous. She saw me as an obstacle to her lifestyle, and she was willing to manipulate Danny and exploit my love for my grandchildren to get what she wanted. The moment I hung up with Sarah, I went to work like I was balancing the teller drawers on a Friday night, every penny, every paper, perfectly in place. I copied the mortgage clause, printed Crystal's forged loan papers, and organized screenshots of her Instagram haul stories, each one a receipt in disguise. Nothing dramatic, just quiet bookkeeping for the storm I knew was coming. Evidence. In order, 2030 to 2145. I cataloged every recording from my hallway camera. Crystal dismissing me as senile. Plotting to flip my bungalow like a garage sale trinket. I saved them beside ledgers that showed 15 years of rent rolling in proof. I was anything but forgetful. While documents stacked up, I tended my house. A lender has a duty to protect her collateral after all. One hinge, one coat of paint, one squeaky step fixed. If Crystal ever tried to push a sale, she'd find the place spotless and entirely out of her reach. Then I phoned Danny and said Christmas should be at Nana's this year. No caterers, no hashtags, just family. He sounded relieved. Crystal texted a single emoji e-roll, then posted how exhausting holiday travel would be. I took a screenshot. Insurance. The children filled the house with the sweet noise of innocent sprinkles everywhere. Jokes about Santa eating too many cookies. I'd almost forgotten the presentation waiting on my laptop. Crystal swept in like a winter draft cold, perfumed, impatient. Perfect. I spoke evenly, no anger, just arithmetic. Slide 1, the mortgage transfer. Slide 2, 3 years of reduced payments. Slide 3, the $180,000 in interest I had forgiven. Each number landed like a snowflake quiet, undeniable, piling into a drift Crystal couldn't shovel. Next, Crystal's ledger every swipe. Every shrug when the kids asked why dance lessons were too expensive. The room went still except for Lily whispering, "Mommy bought all that instead of my recital? The default clause, 27 minutes and 30 seconds minus 28 to 15. I explained the clause. Hostility toward the lender triggers immediate repayment. Crystal's Thanksgiving words, recorded in high definition, satisfied that requirement. Danny understood before I finished the sentence. I offered choices: stay with Crystal and repay every cent in 90 days, or end the marriage and keep the home under my continued, documented support. Either way, Lily and Mason's stability came first. She chose a third option flight. By New Year's, divorce papers arrived. Her lawyer discovered the mortgage fraud and pivoted from demands to damage control. Danny and the children moved in. The spare room became a study den. The lawn found proud new stripes. Danny enrolled in Meg classes for accounting. Ironic, he said, but fitting. Sometimes we replay that Thanksgiving silence, but more often, we savor the new sound. Kids safe, numbers honest, future clear. Crystal called me dead weight. Turns out ballast keeps a vessel upright in every storm. I will remain the unseen keel beneath this family's boat, steady and sure. Because foundations don't brag, they simply hold everything else above water. And that, I've learned, is the heaviest but most precious weight anyone can carry.